VWs. I wanted to finish up the thing on the 25 most painful learning things, and also just give a few tips to, you know, if you're a regular guy who wants to restore a VW in your garage, not an auto mechanic, not an auto specialist, not a body person or a engine builder or anything. You want to just try to do it. It's completely doable, and so I just wanted to give some tips. And so again, this is like numbers 21 through 25 of like learnings and like kind of interesting things. So the first one, which I found actually kind of hilarious, is that the horn on the Beetle is basically triggered when you ground the steering column. So let's see, I can give an example of this. Let me just grab a wire. All right, so I got a little wire here, and the thing that is funny about this is I had been, you know, I wired everything up, and I wired up the, you know, my steering wheel with the half ring, and then I started putting these gauges in place, and I'm driving around, and embarrassingly, my horn just went off, and it wouldn't stop going off, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? It turns out this scratched off and was touching my that there. And so I just wanted to show that when you, I don't know if this is if this has to be on or not for the horn to work, but just wanted to show that say you have something grounded like this. I assume that's grounded here. If I go on the side and I touch it to my steering column, it's so silly. It's super silly that basically the steering column is like a live part of the circuit. All you have to do is ground the steering column and the horn goes off. So, you know, all of these things, like say this little rubber guy here, you know, it can't touch, it can't rub, and then going in there, you know, it's just very silly that the steering column grounding is basically what you're doing when you press on the horn button. So that's a thing to learn. If you don't want an embarrassing moment where your horn is going off and you can't figure out how to turn it off, just remember, steering column grounded, horn beeps. Okay, the second one, so horn fuel gauge. Get the OEM fuel gauge. Do not buy one where online it looks like the face of the fuel gauge is the same, but you're gonna get a plastic gauge and it's gonna be a piece of crap. And so what you want is the one with the metal and the nice little knob in the back. What you don't want is something that looks like this. See, you see the plastic there? This whole plastic, the knob is plastic, the whole thing was cheap, and I wound up actually taking off this front thing of a OEM and putting it on so that you couldn't tell on the dash. But this is a piece of crap, and also you have to hold the cable in place with like a screw that goes through plastic, and it's just a piece of crap. So don't do it. Buy the OEM one. You probably have to spend like $50 on the Samba and get an OEM one that is metal. Okay, so that is a fuel gauge. Next one, well, I already talked about this one, turn signal relay. Get the LED version of the relay so that you won't have the double time flasher if a bulb burns out, and it's always super annoying. That happened on both the Beetle and the bus, so again, look for the LED version of your turn signal relay. Okay, next one, motor install. So when you're installing a motor, see, when you're installing a motor in the bus, it works great because you're taking off this back thing. You can just roll it right up in there, and it goes in it with no problems whatsoever. Then you just reassemble the stuff in the back. But when you're installing a dual carburetor motor in a Beetle like this, you lift up the Beetle, slide that motor up under there, and then you're lowering the body down. And I will tell you, there are a couple of things that will hit. your dual carbs are going to hit on the sides when it's coming up. So you want to take off take off your carbs, and I think you probably want to take it off down to about you might even want to take off the intake manifolds, and just it's easiest that way. These tubes, they're very fragile and they will hit, and you'll bend them and mess them up a little bit. You see, I did, and it took me, I was doing this a couple of times and it kind of mushed them up against, you can see this thing is coming off here. I don't know why. I gotta put my rubber thing back in place so I can see something, I don't know if that's gasoline or what, but something here, like this grime here. What is that? You know, what is that there? I'm gonna have to look. Probably some kind of, I don't know what's going on there. This one's clean. This one's not. A lot of times that happens when you start spewing something out of your carb, so I might have to check for an intake leak. But any case, my point was, when you put a dual carb motor into the Beetle, you might do best to take your intake manifolds off and take off your the paper tubes. There's paper with metal on the inside, those because those might get damaged, and they're pretty easy to take on and off. So I tried it, and I kind of had clamped down the dual carbs and was starting to mangle stuff, and I was in a very awkward position where I had the weight of the Beetle body kind of coming down on my motor, and I couldn't really figure out which thing I needed to take off. So just take off your dual carbs, take off those paper fresh air tubes, and then you have a much easier experience putting your motor into your. All right, and now item number 25, fuel pump, electrical versus mechanical, and how do they interact with the carbs, fuel pressure, etc., idle jets. So I started off with mechanical fuel pumps, and then the different versions. If you have an alternator or a generator, you have a different sort of a plunger length, and you've got to make sure you get the right thing. But honestly, the aftermarket ones, you never get a really consistent fuel pressure, and I wound up having too little and too much, and then blowing fuel through the carbs and whatever. So I was like, no more mechanical, I'll go with electrical. So when I went with electrical fuel pumps, I determined that, so I put, you probably can't see it, but it's in here behind my right front wheel. I have a fuel pump, and so it goes from the fuel tank to a solenoid that is wired up. So when you put the key in the ignition, it allows the fuel to go through. That's a good cutoff. Then it goes into the fuel pump. Then it goes to a pressure regulator, which is adjusted to get 3 pounds of fuel pressure. Some people will say it should be 2. I set it at 3 just in case. Then it goes through the tunnel, comes out here, and then I have the lines come in. It goes to this fuel filter, and then it goes to my gauge, and then it splits and goes to the 2 carbs. And one thing that I just wanted to say is that your carb can get sort of overrun with the pressure and start dripping in various ways. So it is probably smart to set it at 2 pounds of pressure, and also to make sure that your the place where the fuel goes into the carb is like really nicely sealed. And also if you have new carbs, then it usually holds the fuel pretty well. But like, for example, if I turn on my ignition and the fuel pump is just going, but the engine's not going, and if I waited 5 or 10 minutes, I'm gonna get dripping out of the carbs, just because it's like relentless 3 pounds of pressure trying to go into the carbs. And while it holds pretty well, it doesn't really seem to hold that well. So just want to say, like, I'm fully on board with upgrading to an electrical fuel pump. I like that. I like having the solenoid. I like having the fuel pressure regulator. I like having the gauge so that I can always tell if I don't have fuel pressure. The other thing that can happen is if you don't have good venting on your gas, tank, you can get enough of a vacuum that even your pump can't overcome the vacuum, and you don't get any fuel pressure. So it's good to have the gauge, because when you get the vacuum, or if something like that happens, you can see you're getting 0 pounds of fuel pressure, even if your fuel pump is going. And so, yeah, this whole setup of vented fuel tank to solenoid to fuel pump to fuel pressure regulator, then going through a fuel filter, then through the fuel gauge, and then to your dual carbs, and then limit the pressure to 2 pounds, and then that is going to work really well for you. So anyway, that is the fuel pump stuff, and that is number 25. The last thing I just wanted to say is, if you're looking to build a motor, there's just a couple of things that are super, super useful to start out with. So I took my stand, and you want to get this. If you don't have like a stand, you can make this off of a transaxle when you cut it, but this is called a Zalex Ring. You can get this little bushing for a 6 volt or a 12 volt starter, and this is great. It's called a Zalex Ring. And then there's another thing called the Zalex it's the starting mechanism. It looks like this, and this is just a wiring harness that mimics having like a key and various things to go to your generator, and et cetera, and it has a button for the starter. And so the combination of a stand like this, Zalex Ring, the right bushing for your starter, get another battery, and then get the Zalex starter wiring harness, and then you can basically just tweak your engine, within your garage. And it's a pretty low cost way to do it. I think this was maybe a couple $100, and that was maybe 100 and something bucks, and you're talking $300. Then I bought a tube like this, ran it out the window, and this tube is for just to pipe my exhaust so that I don't get a Darwin Award of asphyxiating myself inside the garage while I run the motor. But this is just a great way. You can look under the motor, you can look behind the motor, things that you can't do when the motor is in the vehicle. Like, you can't see the back part of the motor with your flywheel, for example. And of course, the flywheel is spinning here. You definitely don't want to get your finger in there. There's some slightly dangerous things about running the motor by itself in the garage, which is why I have the fire extinguisher up here, and always be ready, because you also have fuel. So I had bought this fuel tank here, and then I can set the fuel tank up here just like it's on the bus, and then the fuel tank would go to a fuel pump, which I had mounted here. And that setup worked really great for tuning the motors. I tuned a really old one and sold it for the $1,000 that I used to buy the 61 body. Then I tuned the one that's in the Beetle, got it working really well, no leaks, no anything before I put it in. Of course, the second I put it in, it starts leaking oil and other forms of stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to give that advice for Zalex Ring, Zalex Staarter. Get your exhaust piped out the window. Get a fuel tank like this that you can, it sits horizontally, and it has a tube that I can then run into the fuel pump. If you do all those things, should be relatively easy for you to start engine building, and also get your body up onto the rolly stand and get to work. All right. Numbers 21 through 25 of my painful learnings, and I just wanted to give a little bit more info. If you want to do this, you want to restore a Beetle, and you get a good candidate of a Beetle, hopefully good chassis. Remember the title. You want to have the title with the matching VIN. You only really care about the number that's on the tunnel of the chassis. The plate, you can take it or leave it, but the number that's on the chassis is your actual VIN that needs to match the title. It may be that nobody ever checks it, but you want to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. So then once you get the Beetle, your first step is to make a stand like this. You see the stand? The stand is absolutely critical. You put the body and the wheel wells and whatever you put on these two stands. Mine are rolly like this. That's the more expensive way to go, because these rolling things with the casters and the locks like this, these are pretty expensive. You got to get 8 of those wheels, and I just did this with 4x4s because you can buy 4x4s pretty cheap. and do like this. And as far as the measurements go, you know, I wanted to have a solid base, so I did that's 29 inches, 29-inch base. That keeps the thing from tipping over. And then from the ground up, this is about 3 feet, 35.5 inches, 35.5 inches off the ground. That is perfect, because what it allows you to do is roll. You can roll the body back and forth over the chassis and store them both in your garage. And the only thing that kind of hits is the gear shifter. If you leave it on, will hit the underside of certain parts of the body. So you have that, and then the length of this thing, because you want to get it through to the other side, and you also want this to clear your wheelbase so that you can roll the chassis right up in between this thing. So using a 4x4, it's 6 feet. It's 6 feet wide. 6 feet wide with you know, the 4 inches here, 4 inches there. That allows you to perfectly roll your chassis wheelbase right in between the measurements of this. So what's interesting is that once you disassemble your body from your chassis and you lift up the body, and you can do this as one person. So like what I did is I got a block and tackle like this. This block and tackle is actually for like hunters that like kill a deer, and then you use this block and tackle to get the dead carcass into your pickup truck or something like that. But anyway, I bought that, and I put a thing up in my carport. You see this little eye bolt, and then I use that to lift up the body on and off, and I can put it up onto this. And so I just want to say that it's very interesting once you get the body up and off of the chassis, and you start examining the chassis, like what do you have to do with the floor pans? What do you have to do with your heater channels? What things are you cutting out, and what things are you using sort of generic weld steel, and what things do you have to buy an actual molded part? It becomes really clear once you assemble it. I mean, once you disassemble it and you start examining closely each little thing, you know, what's garbage, what is fixable, what is, you know, weldable, etc. So, you know, my advice is you get your Beetle, you make one of these rolly stands, remember those measurements, get yourself one of these, which is, you can, you know, I bought the version of this which is a like a 220 or 230 volt model. And then since I had an electric car before, what I do is I actually just made a plug here, and so I plug my welder into the basically what looks like a dryer plug or a stove plug or whatever, but it's a plug that I used to use for this when I had the i3. Now I don't use it, so the only thing I'm using it for is my my welder. And get yourself a welder, get yourself these door bars, and make yourself a rolly stand. Get your Beetle here and separate the body from the chassis. Everything else becomes super self-explanatory as you disassemble it. And I just highly recommend it. One of the reasons is that once you reassemble it, you put a slightly larger engine into your Beetle, it's fast as hell. You know, this is like a, whatever, it's probably 100, 110 horsepower engine in a 1,500 pound Beetle. And, you know, I redid all the bushings and all the, like, whatever link pins and kingpin and all that stuff. And the thing is like on rails, and it's super fast and it's super light and it's really, really fun. And it looks like kind of like a slow ass Beetle, but it's like, it's really, really fabulous to drive. So that's my advice. That's tips 21 through 25. Hope you enjoy, and get yourself a Beetle and restore it.